Hi, everybody. Welcome to Patriots History. I'm Larry Swikart, co-author of Patriots History of the United States. And hold on, let me get rid of this light. There we go. That's better. Co-author of Patriots History of the United States, which is now in its 43rd printing. Folks, this is a 1,000-page history book. It's in its 43rd printing. Truly amazing. I've told this story before. But when Mike Allen and I discussed writing a book, our only objective was to write a textbook that we could use when teaching our own history classes. That the stuff that was out there, the books that were out there, just weren't satisfying. They were, we thought, way too skewed liberally. That main thing was we spent too much time arguing with the textbook. And that's a pain. You don't want to do that. So we started writing Patriots History of the United States. And we really didn't think we'd have a publisher. We did have an agent because I had an agent through a prior encyclopedia series I'd done, a couple of them. And we wrote our manuscript, and it was 2,000 pages, typewritten, which is probably 1,500 pages typeset. So he took one look at that and goes, "This is too long." He said, "If you want to pay me 20%, usually an agent's fee is 15, you want to pay me 20%, I will not only represent you, but I'll go into this and cut it down to a level I think will allow us to sell it." What did we have to lose, right? 80% of something's better than 100% of nothing. So he did, he cut it down, and a brand new publisher called Sentinel had just come out as an imprint of the Penguin Publishing Company, and they wanted us to be either their first or second book. But our editor got a hold of it, and she goes, "This is still too long. We got to cut a lot." So she chopped another close to 400 pages off of it, and it was still too long. She said, "Roger's cut it, you guys have cut it, I've cut it, and it's still too long, so I'm going to send it out to an independent editor, see what he can do with it." And so sure enough, she sent it out to a guy, darn, forget his name right now, but he did a great job, and cut it by another 100 or so pages. And amazingly, nothing was missing. I mean, when he was done cutting, usually you go, "Oh man, yeah, you left this out. That's really going to hurt." But when I read it through, Mike read it through, we go, we didn't need that in there. It reads just fine without it. So the fact that we're in our 43rd printing is pretty remarkable. 500,000 copies in print. And just a reminder, if you want the updated 23rd chapter, which covers the years 2018 to 2023, it's a PDF of one chapter and a number of inserts that you can choose or choose not to read or have your student read as you go through the book. If you want that PDF, email me at larry@wildworldofhistory.com, and I'll send you the PDF free. Also, currently I'm running an offer at Wild World of History, Patriots History of the United States, and Patriots History of Globalism for a special offer autographed. We also have an offer with Patriots History and the, where is it? The Patriots History Reader, which is all of the documents that go with Patriots History of the United States. So check that out. And you might like my VIP. The VIP is a series of videos, different video lessons. Now we probably have 7 or 8 of these lesson series. Everything from the 1620 default, why Plymouth is the default for the origin of American exceptionalism, not Jamestown. And when you read it that way, when you understand why Plymouth was different, makes all the difference in the world, because then you totally blow out of the water this nonsense about the 1619 Project and slavery, because there weren't no slaves at Plymouth. Anyway, so consider signing up for the VIP. It's only $6 a month. There's a full lesson series on Reagan, the American president, 23 videos, a full lesson series on integrity with Winston Churchill. I think there's about 20 videos there. The 1620 default, which I think has 11 or 12 videos, just all sorts of great video lesson series. And then, of course, if you want the curriculum to go right with Patriots History United States, we have that available too, and I teach every lesson in high production video. Well, let's get started. As always, I am reading from the 15th anniversary edition, which you see behind me. If you have an earlier edition, the pages aren't going to line up. Probably the headers will be the same, but not all the time. If you go back to a 2006 or 2007 edition, even then some of the headers are wrong. So I'm reading from the 15th anniversary edition on page 442, Material Abundance, Social Reform, in the chapter called The Sinews of Democracy. So we're in the 1870s, 80s, 90s. So page 442. While the nation struggled with Reconstruction, patronage, and Indian policy, the pace of industrial production and business enterprise had rapidly accelerated. Growing industries, increasing immigration, and gradual replacement of the family farm with a new factory system as the chief form of economic organization brought new stresses. Perhaps because the factories were located generally in the North where the intellectuals were, perhaps because the quote Negro problem had proven more difficult to solve, and perhaps because Reconstruction itself in many ways reflected the political corruption that had characterized the Tweed Ring, Eastern intellectuals, upper-class philanthropists, and middle-class women all gradually abandoned the quest for equality of Black Americans in order to focus on goals they could more easily achieve. Emphasizing legislation that regulated large businesses, the hated trusts, these activists pursued widespread social and economic changes under the umbrella of reform. Now, you've got to watch out with the word reform. God did not reform nothing. God recreated. Okay. He didn't take man and go, I'm just going to make you better. He said all things are made new, that you're a new creature in Christ Jesus. So God doesn't deal in the business of reform. Humans do. And every time you see the word reform, watch out. Because usually what follows, not always, but usually what follows is something worse than what was reformed. Because men are men, right? They also embarked on a crusade to end private vices, mostly exhibited by the lower classes, particularly immigrants, including prostitution, pornography, drugs, and hard liquor. This is an ongoing theme in American history. Think homeowners associations. A lot of what goes on in homeowners associations is very class oriented. Hey, nobody wants junkers up on blocks sitting in front of their house. You know what Jeff Foxworthy joke was that you know you're a redneck if your home has wheels and your car doesn't. You don't want to see in your neighborhood buildings painted pink and purple and overgrown with weeds. I get all that. But at the same time, you know as well as I do that there are homeowner Nazis and that they will absolutely try to control your life right down to if you have a little chip of wood out of a part of your driveway or something, or one plant's a little bit too overgrown, they're going to be on you. Well, there's a lot of this is classism, this notion that we don't want those people in our neighborhood. We're above those people. And so whenever you see reform directed at other groups, there's almost an element of class in it. And I hate the word class It's a Marxist term. In real life, there's no such thing as a class. Nobody is inherently in a group for their life, but it is a handy dandy little qualifier here. Another group who saw itself as victims of industry and powerful interests also clamored for change, largely through the direct intervention of the federal government. This is the first time outside of slavery, outside of black rights, that you start to see the federal government involved in trying to engage in reform. Agrarians, especially in the West and the South, detected what they thought was a deliberate campaign to keep them living on the margin. Convinced that railroads, banks, and grain elevator operators were all conspiring to steal their earnings, reinforced by a government policy of subsidies and deflation, they too clamored for reform. So you begin to get this unholy alliance of intellectuals, mostly East class people, upper class people, and lower class, middle class to middle lower to lower class farmers, day workers, businessmen, forming this alliance to engage in reform, usually through some sort of regulation. The two groups, intellectual reformers and the agrarians, had little in common, save they both saw Uncle Sam as a combination moral evangelist and playground monitor. Whereas upper class reformers sneered at the rural hicks who wanted to force the railroads to lower prices, they nevertheless saw the necessity to temporarily ally with them. It would be a long road to the ultimate fusion of the two groups in the Prohibition movement. Very interesting how they came together in Prohibition. And for the better part of the late 19th century, they ran on roughly parallel rails without touching. It's to jump way ahead. It's almost what we're witnessing now with Donald Trump, because Trump has created a fusion of the top part of lower classes, the industrial lower class, as opposed to the welfare-oriented lower class, the middle class, who's been totally excluded from everything, but now he's starting to pull in the uber rich tech class for a whole different bunch of reasons. And here's this fusion of these groups that normally would never be seen together in a restaurant or anyplace else, right? Hold on. Part of the affinity for government action had come from experience in cities where individuals could not repair their own streets or clear their own harbors. Cities had become exactly what Jefferson feared, pits of political patronage built largely on immigrants and maintained by graft and spoils. Political reform, however, proved difficult to come by. In the first place, both parties played the spoils game. Second, individuals did benefit from the political largesse. I mean, you did get your street pothole fixed, and constituents could, to some degree, be bought off. To the reformers of the late 1800s, the circumstance was eminently correctable, mainly through the expansion of the franchise, i.e., the vote, and through more open and frequent use of the machinery of democracy. Efforts to allow people to bring up their own legislation with sufficient signatures on a petition, known as initiative, which originated in rural populist circles but which quickly spread to the cities, or to vote on an act of a state legislature known as a referendum, or even to remove a problem judge or a long-term elected official called recall, were all discussed frequently. An equally important issue, and one the reformers thought easier to maintain because they controlled the terms of the debate, involved public health. Public health, of course, is ultimately personal and not public at all. And as the reformers found, addressing public health issues meant imposing one group's standards of hygiene and behavior upon others with or without their consent. But the offensive began inoffensively enough, with threats to take seriously by all: safe water and the prevention of fire. Two of the most serious enemies of safe cities in the 1800s, fire and disease, could be fought by the same weapon, water. At the end of the American Revolution, observers were struck by the city's, quote, almost incredible absence of the most elementary sanitary provisions. At that time in New York, columns of slaves belonging to the wealthiest families each evening carried tubs filled with feces and urine to the banks of the Hudson. Most people simply, quote, disposed of the excrement by flipping it through the handiest window. Piles of feces remained where they landed until either Tuesday or Friday, when a city ordinance required they be pushed or swept into the streets. In winter, however, quote, it lay where it landed, where it received the local appellation of corporate pudding. Locals sank wells into the middle of the streets, whereupon seepage drained into the drinking supply. You can imagine how unhealthy this was. Other sources of water included New York's T water pump, fed by the seepage from Collect Pond, which by 1783 was filled to dead dogs, cats, rodents, and further seasoned with the laundry drippings of all shantytown residents who lived on its banks. The United States trailed France and England in this respect. Paris had 14 miles of sewers in 1808, and London began a massive sewer system that was substantially completed by 1865. Yet Philadelphia still depended heavily on its 82,000 cesspools in 1877. Nevertheless, citywide water systems spread steadily, if slowly, through the century. The resulting improved sanitation was instantly reflected in plunging death rates. By mid-century, typhoid deaths had fallen in Boston and New York and plummeted in New Orleans and Brooklyn. Digestive illness also dropped steadily. Where cholera once struck fear in the hearts of Jacksonian city dwellers, by the time of the Great Depression, it had essentially been eliminated as a major public health threat. Such progress depended heavily on safe water systems. As late as the 1830s, most citywide water systems were privately constructed. In 1800, only 5.9% of the waterworks were publicly financed, and in 1830, a full 80% of the existing water systems remained in private hands, although this percentage had fallen to only 50% by the 1880s. Chicago adopted a modified public system in which the owner of property had to show proof that he owned a lot before he could vote on any levy related to water assessments. Brooklyn, 1857, Chicago, 1859, Providence, 1869, New Haven, 1872, Boston, 1876, Cincinnati, 1870, and Indianapolis, 1870, all had citywide planned water systems, and Worcester, Massachusetts, 1890, had the country's first modern sewage disposal plant that employed chemicals to eliminate waste. By that time, nearly 600 waterworks served more than 14.1 million urban residents. These systems, which used steam pumps, had become fairly sophisticated. Along with cast iron pipes, the pumps provided effective protection against fire, especially when used in conjunction with hydrants, which were installed in New York in the early 1800s. By the middle of the century, major cities like Boston and Philadelphia had thousands of hydrants. Still, large-scale fires swept through Chicago in 1871, New York 1876, Colorado Springs 1878, and San Francisco on multiple dates, some resulting from earthquakes. Chicago suffered more than 200 million in damage, a staggering loss in the 19th century, in its 1871 blaze, which, according to legend, was started when Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern. Flames leaped 30 to 40 feet into the air, spreading throughout the West Side's downtrodden shacks, then leaping the Chicago River to set most of the city afire. Even the wealthy North Side combusted when the winds carried aloft a burning board that set the district's main fire station afire. Ultimately, thousands of people sought shelter in the frigid October water of Lake Michigan. These fires occurred in no small part because many cities still used natural gas lighting, which proved susceptible to explosions. Fire could then spread easily because wood was the most common construction material in all but the largest buildings. The growing number of citywide water systems and the fire departments offered a hope of reducing that number and spread of fires. Generally speaking, by 1900, most of the apocalyptic fires that eradicated entire towns occurred on the grasslands, where in a 2-year period, the Dakota towns of Leola, Jamestown, Syketown, and Mount Vernon were, quote, virtually incinerated by fires rising out of the prairies. Even with fire prevention measures, plenty of water and urban fire departments, often volunteer, fire-related disasters still plagued America well into the 20th century. Baltimore suffered a 2-day fire in 1904, and the San Francisco quake set off fires that paved the way for a binge of looting by inhabitants of the notorious Barbary Coast section of the town. Soldiers had to be called in, and authorities issued orders to shoot looters on sight. The introduction of electricity, more than the appearance of water systems, diminished the threat of fires in American cities. Before electricity, urban areas had relied on gas lighting, and a leak could turn city blocks into smoking ruins. When electric dynamos began to provide energy for lighting in the major cities, gas originated fires originally became less frequent. The introduction of electricity to business, however, could only ensue after several corporate giants strode onto the national stage. So, next time we will dive into the titans of industry and the corporate leaders who changed America in the 1800s. I'll see you then. Oh, Christmas is coming. Remember, get your book orders in as soon as possible. It's going to take, today's the 13th, it's going to take tomorrow, the next day is about the last time you could order a book, get it autographed, and get it shipped back to you in time for Christmas. So just keep that in mind. All right, I'll see you back here next time